City of the Orphans, Chapter 39. The kids look up and down Christie Street. It's dark, but far as they can tell, Bruno ain't there. Max whispers, "Think we're okay." "I need a place with light," says Willa. "Not the street." They walk along, not talking, till Max turns toward a small saloon. "This'll work." The saloon. A sign names it The Bottoms. At the base of the tenement, like most city drums, it's a dingy room with a little stand-up bar and a few bottles. A gas jet and a blue glass bottle globe hangs from the ceiling, its light somehow making the smoky gloom darker. On one wall, there's a lopsided picture of the president, Grover Cleveland. On the wooden floor, sprinkled with dirty sawdust, sits a brass spittoon near a potted rubber plant with large, glossy, yellow-tinted leaves. Only a few small tables with some people sitting and smoking, one guy drinking, others just talking. A lady, her hat tipped down over her face, asleep in her chair. The barkeep stands behind the bar. He's a big fat guy with a black beard and top hat. His name is Otis. Max knows him, 'cause he and his family live next to his tenement. Emma used to mind his kids. "Hey there, Mr. Max," Otis calls in a deep voice. When Max and Willa walk in, "How you doing? How your folks? How's Emma?" "Fine," says Max. Okay, if me and my friends sit and talk. Make yourself at home. Who's the lady?" "Willa. She's living with us now." "Pleasure to meet you, Willa." "Friend of Max, friend of mine. Want something to drink?" He throws a wink. Max shakes his head, goes to the corner table and sits. Willa takes this opposite chair, sets her blue box on the table, checks to see if anyone is near. Satisfied no one is, she sets her china-faced doll on her lap so the doll's eye is just above tabletop level. Max says, "Your doll is staring at me." Willa, her voice small, gives a little smile. "She likes you. She got a name?" Max says. "Gretchen. My mother gave it to me." "Pleased to meet ya, Gretchen." Willa holds up her doll, though the doll don't have no hands, just clothes stumps. Max shakes one. Putting the doll back on her lap, Willa draws the tin box closer to her, as if to hug it. Max hears the slight rattle. Willa, eyes fixed on box, strokes the tin box with her fingers. Slowly, she eases up, the top on its hinge, swings it toward Max so he can't see what's inside. Reaching into the box, Willa picks up a photograph glued to a thick piece of cardboard. She holds the card carefully in two hands, stares at it. Then she sets it on the table in front of Max, turning it around so he can see what it is. It's a picture of a family. There's a man standing behind a seated woman. On one side of the woman is a girl. Right off, Max sees that it's Willa. She's leaning on the woman's knee, is dressed nice and clean, with long, smooth hair. She's in a white, lacy dress. Hair in ribbon braids. The doll, Gretchen, is dangling from her hand. As for the woman, she's wearing a long skirt with a high collar. She don't look particularly rich, but she ain't poor either. Face is like Willa's, round, small mouth, nose somewhat sharp, hair piled up with care. But the woman ain't smiling. Even her eyes seem unhappy. She has one hand pushed forward so Max can see the wedding ring on her finger, as if making sure everyone'll know she's married. The man's wearing a dark suit, holding a derby in the crook of his arm, hair combed back, parted in the middle. His face is long, smooth-shaven, eyes forward. One of his hands rests on the woman's shoulder, got a smile, but it seems phony. Willa's looking straight out, with a big, happy grin, a real one, as if she ain't noticing how the people behind her are looking and feeling, which aren't so good. Max stares at the picture, then glances at Willa, not sure what to say. "My family," Willa says softly, leaning forward to point them out. "My father, my mother, me." Max says, "You all look nice." Willa nods while gazing at the picture. It's a while before she looks up at Max. I just didn't want you to think I never had a family. I believed you. That's your mother, right? Who died? They said it was the wasting disease. Like Mr. Dog and Agnes." Max points. "Your father?" Willa frowns, but bobs her head. Max stares at the mug, fixing his face in his head, trying to get some idea what he was. Guess what happened to him? Willa don't speak. Or look at Max. Just takes a deep breath, hunched over as if it's trying to hide. Max stares at the mug, fixing his face in his head, trying to get some idea what he was. Guess what happened to him? Willa don't speak, or look at Max. Just takes a deep breath, hunched over as if trying to hide. Max feels waves of sadness coming from her. Not knowing what more to say, he waits. Willa looks up. Is it really all right for me to come and live with you, your family? Sure, Gretchen, too. The fluttering gaslight seems to make Willa's face tremble. She'd like that, she says. So will you, says Max. Willa stares at the family. She'd like that, she says. So will you, says Max. Willa stares at the family picture for a while before carefully placing it back into the box, closing the lid with a little click that sounds like the end. Max, glad the talk is over, says, "Come on, we need to get home." Home, Willa repeats with a shy smile, as if she's remembering a word. City of the Orphans, Chapter 40. Same time as Max and Willa are going home, Bartleby Donk over a Delancey Street sits at his desk telling himself he was stupid to get caught up in those kids' problems. The girl, that Emma, means nothing to him. Her story is no different from 10,000 stories he's heard. They all seem the same. Why did I get pulled in, he asked himself. But he knows the answer. It was their telling me they read the stupid story, believing it. Never mind, Law. I need to teach them what detection really is. And that girl, Willa, she spoke up, didn't back away, was strong, wasn't scared of me. Donk stretches his side whiskers, rubs his eyes, sighs deeply, wonders how long he'll stay alive. He looks at what he was writing, worries if he can finish it before he is finished. Garbage, he mutters, and shows the papers angrily to one side for picking up the scrap on which he'd written Emma Gellis. He stares at it. I'm a fool, he says, coughing. Donk plucks up a stained cloth and spits blood into it. I hate children, he says. They believe in things, like me. Pressing down on the wooden arms of his chair, he rises precautiously, almost falling. He leans against the desk to catch himself. Then he snatches up his listening tube and hangs it round his neck. Grabs the cane that's leaning against the desk, walking slowly, leaning on the cane, almost shuffling. Donk passes on his room. Don't even bother to shut the door behind him. Hey, there's nothing worth stealing. When he reaches the street, he looks up and down. In the murkiness, the only light comes from the street lamps. Donk glares at him. He hates electric light. As far as he's concerned, gaslight is better. Gives more light, has life. Standing there, he has a sudden memory of gaslight making a lady's diamond necklace glow so that when it hung over her neck, it was like cold fire lighting up her face. Her black hair, her dark eyes, the light made her even more beautiful than she already was. He gave the lady the necklace. With a rueful shake of his head, Donk moves slowly along with the sidewalk till he reaches a restaurant whose window has a sign in golden letters. The Promised Land, cheap eats, telephone, 5 cents. Over the window, someone has stuck another sign, coffee and roll, 3 cents. Donk enters. There are 9 tables, 2 chairs at each. It all smells of stale grease and tobacco. A few people are sitting neath the feeble electric light, which hangs from the ceiling. A mournful waiter, pale, long-faced, big-nosed, thin-fingered, wearing a frayed black suit and a grease-stained apron tied high over his waist, steps forward like an undertaker. Mr. Donk, sir, he says, bobbing and squeezing his hands together. How are you today? The usual table, sir. Complete dinner, sir. Beef and fried oysters. 25 cents tonight, sir. I need the telephone, Donk growls. Very good, sir. Please step this way. The waiter guides Mr. Donk to the back of the restaurant, where he opens the door. Beyond is a small room with 1 chair. Near the chair, attached to the wall, is a telephone. The telephone, a new one, consists of 2 wooden boxes, one atop the other. The top box has a crank on one side, 2 bells on its face. From the bottom box, there's an electrical cord attached to the black tube. That's the listening end to talk. You got to put your mouth near a hole in the same box. When the waiter leaves, Donk leans toward the telephone till his mouth is near the talking hole, takes down the listening tube with one hand, turns the crank a few times with the other hand. Hello, Central, he shouts into the hole. Hello, Central. He shoves the listening end near his better ear. This is Central, comes a woman's voice. Rough, crackly with static. Donk shouts, Connect me with the Waldorf Hotel. Yes, sir. Just a moment, sir. Donk coughs. Connection made, says the woman. He can hear ringing sounds. Waldorf Hotel, says a voice. If from far away, there's a static too. I need to speak to Mr. Packwood, your detective. Donk all but shouts. I shall have to locate him, sir. I'll stay right here. May I tell him who's calling? His almost brother-in-law. Sir? Never mind. Just tell him it's his old pal from the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Bartleby Donk. Yes, sir. Mr. Donk, please wait. Don't worry. I'm not going to disappear. Soon. Not yet. A coughing fit shakes his whole body. City of the Orphans, Chapter 41. Max and Willa get home. They haven't talked much. Just before they go up the stoop, Max says, I'm not going to tell my parents about Donk. How come? What if they tells me not to work with him? Willa says nothing. Told you, Max goes on. They don't feel good doing new things. If you don't tell him, can't say not to, right? After a moment, Willa says, I don't know them. Come on, says Max. In the warm kitchen, Papa is seated at the table, smoking his pipe. Mama is giving him dinner. Agnes ain't there. Max hears his three brothers fooling in the front room. Mama says, You're home late tonight. Papers took a long time, says Max, but we sold everything. He dumps his coins on the table, makes the usual divide, putting most of the pennies in his cigar box over the stove. He slides 8 cents across the table to Papa. All 8, he says. Good, Max, says Papa. We need every one. Where's Agnes? Max. At class, says Mama. Papa turns to Willa. Please, young lady, if you would be so good as to sit. He puts a hand on the back of the nearest chair. I should be pleased to talk to you. With a nervous glance at Max, Willa sits with her doll and tin box on her lap. She looks down. Papa pushes his soup bowl away and turns his chair. So he's facing Willa. My wife, he says to her, tells me you're going to live with us. Mama at the stove listens. So does Max. Willa peeks up at Papa. Yes, sir, if that's all right. Your parents are no longer with you? Papa goes on. Do I understand that properly? Willa swallows. Yes, sir. I'm truly sorry to hear it. I'm sure they were fine people, but it's not right that a girl should be living alone on the streets. And now winter's coming. So my whole family has agreed that you must come and live with us. We don't have much, but we shall manage. He holds up a large hand. I wanted to welcome you. Thank you, sir, says Willa, her voice so low, Max can barely hear it. Willa looks up, sees Papa's hand, and puts it out her own. She and Papa shake. Willa's small hand swallowed up in his large one. I have a job, sir, she says, which is, I pick rags at the dumps, 10 cents a week. Papa frowns, shakes his head. No more of that. We'll find something else for you to do. And I think it is best you call me Papa and my wife Mama. It's what all our children do. Your family now. No need for, sir. Willa bobs her head. Yes, Papa. As for sleeping, says Papa, we'll find a spot. Mama says, Agnes, you can share her bed. Willa looks at Papa. You are very kind, she whispers. Max across the room feels proud of his parents. Have you any belongings? Mama asks Willa. Just these, says Willa. She lifts the doll in the tin box. And the doll don't eat much, says Max. Everybody is glad to laugh. Monsieur Zola comes into the apartment. He makes his usual bow. Bonjour, he says, and looks around as if in search of something. Agnes is at class, says Max, grinning. Ah, yes, to be sure, says Zola, his cheeks turning red. A smart young lady. Girl, says Mama fiercely. Monsieur Zola, Papa says, this is Willa, Max's friend. She has become part of our family. She'll be living with us. Willa looks up timidly. Good that you are, Mademoiselle, says Monsieur Zola. You have found fine people. Now forgive me. I will step from the way, but come when called. He goes into the front room, shutting the door behind him. Papa, Max says, keeping his voice low. Did you find a lawyer? Papa shifts uncomfortably. Agnes is looking. Max, we'll find a way, says Mama. Max glances at Willow. When she looks back at him, he knows she's thinking the same thing as he is. Donk. Max says, Mama, Emma really wants to see you tomorrow. After I bring the boys to school, I can take you. And Papa, she needs money for food. I need to see her again, too. Mama and Papa exchange looks. Then Mama says, Yes, I'll go. You got any money to bring her? Asks Max. We'll find it, says Papa. Mama says, and dear God, Max said her trial will be soon. We'll find a lawyer, Papa says. Later, Monsieur Zulot reads the boys some more from the detective story, a chapter called The Truth Unfolds. Willa and Max listen. In the story, the boy detective is looking and finding what he calls clues, bits of information that'll help find the stolen diamonds so he can help the pretty lady. Max decides he must ask Emma if there's anything she can tell him about what happened before she was arrested, some clue. If there is one, he can tell to knock. While Monsieur Zulot is reading, Max steals a look out of the window down to the street. Bruno ain't there, but someone else from the gang is. Max takes a deep breath and thinks, they ain't never gonna stop chasing us. City of the Orphans, Chapter 42. Agnes comes home only after Mama and Papa have gone into their room for the night. What class you been to? Max asks as she takes off her shawl. Typing. I'm up to 48 words a minute. Looking tired, she sits down. Willa jumps up and takes soup from the pot on the stove. She serves Agnes. Thank you, says Agnes, and picks her spoon only to pause. Willa, she says. Willa looks at her. I'm glad you're moving in. There's room for you in my bed. Thank you. Max gets his sister some bread. As Agnes starts to eat, she coughs. Once, twice. I found the name of a lawyer, she says to Max, keeping her voice hushed. Someone at the Educational Alliance told me a Mr. Sisler on Rutger Square. How much he gonna charge? Going to, not gonna. $50. 50? The Alliance people said he's good. We don't have no money like that. They said he'll take a little at a time, says Agnes, bending over her soup. After a moment, Max says, we might have another way. What? A detective. Agnes pauses her eating and looks up. I don't understand. Get, clues and stuff to show Emma didn't steal anything. How are you going to find a detective? One of my friends, Chimmy, told me about a Mr. Donk over the Delancey Street. And Max leans forward, lowers his voice at Willa and me. We went and saw him. Agnes shakes her head disapprovingly. You're listening to too many of Monsieur Zulot's stories. No, says Max. Really, he's gonna teach us. Did he ask you for a lot of money? Max says. He's gonna teach us how to be detectives for nothing. What's he like? Agnes asks. Strange, says Max. Agnes looks at Willa. Do you think a detective is a good idea? I hope so. Did you tell? She moves her head toward the back room. Max shakes his head. They won't like it, Agnes sighs. Maybe your detective will help. Then she says, at the factory they announced we'll be closing in 3 weeks. 3? Cries Max. Agnes nods. Then eats slowly. Later that night, while Agnes is reading at the table, she has a real coughing fit. Max sees her whisper, wiping her mouth. Tries to hide it, but there's blood on her clothes. You okay? Max says. Fine. Willa watches Agnes closely. When everybody goes off to sleep in their regular beds, Willa tells Max she won't sleep in Agnes's bed. It won't be good for Agnes, and I don't mind sleeping on the floor. You're scared of her sickness, ain't you? Max says. After a moment, Willa nods. Max spreads a blanket on the kitchen floor. You can sleep here. Where should I put this? Willa holds up her blue tin. Be safe in my cigar box. Max puts it in there. Max, Willa whispers, did Agnes ever see a doctor? There's one over to Mott Street, says Max. Supposed to be good, only he costs. Mama has a friend, a midwife. She comes sometimes. Willa says no more. Max goes into the front room and looks down on the street. The plug ugly is gone. He goes back to the kitchen. No one out there. He calls softly to Willa. After a moment, Willa says, Max, do you ever feel as if you live in a hole? You mean, like behind your fence? She nods. At the bottom of everything, he says. Want to see something? What? Come on. Max leads Willa out of the apartment and up the narrow steps to the flat roof. There are crisscrossing ropes and cords that people have strung up for drying their washing. The hanging sheets look like flags from nowhere. In the sky, just one or two stars are visible. There's a full moon, but only a lick of light pokes out from behind billowy clouds. On a couple of roofs, fire escapes stick up. That's Mr. Floyd's pigeon coop, Max says. The gray birds, in a large screened box, cluck and coo. He comes up and lets them fly. Don't know why, but they always come back. Look, here, Max says. He goes to the roof wall and points. Lights like strung beads show miles of streets cutting between buildings. To the east and west, the east of Hudson rivers glisten. City sounds roll up, horses' hooves, carriages, rolling bells, jingling, and human voices shouts, calls, and sometimes screams. Turning, Max says, over there you can see the end of the city, the Brooklyn Bridge. All them ships, see, the funnels, some of them smoking, and mast. You know what? I just like coming up here to see how big the city is. Someday, don't care how long it takes, gonna fly around the whole thing. You could come, if you'd like, or maybe get one of those ships and go someplace. Take you if you want. Emma and I come up here too. Why? Just to talk, Max suddenly grins. And guess what? She's teaching me to dance, the two-step. But you know what I keep thinking? What? If Emma's gonna be in prison, it'll kill her. Kill the whole family. Later, in his bed, in the front room, Max tries to think about what it would be like to get on a ship. Where would he go? But his thoughts soon return to Emma, wondering if Mr. Dunk can really help, wondering what he was writing. Willa, asleep, clutches her doll.